Last night I finished reading this amazing book called Influence, The Psychology of Persuasion by Robert Cialdini. And it's an amazing book. Seriously, I learned so many new things from this book. And the thing that I wanted to talk about is the fact that not only did I learn these things, but I made sure to actually remember them. And the way that I did that is by making notes. This is one of the first time that I've actually made notes while reading. Because before it would be I just want to read for enjoyment. I wouldn't bother making notes. It kind of felt just like when I was in school, when you had to do book reports and stuff. I never enjoyed that at all. In fact, there was a time in my life I absolutely hated reading. I never wanted to read. But you see, in school, it's very different than outside of school when you get to choose what books you read. It wasn't the fact that I hated reading. It was just the books that I had to read in school were not enjoyable. Maybe you can relate, right? The books that I had to read in school, it was it was all just fiction, right? I love learning from nonfiction books because it's things that I can actually apply to my life to improve it, right? Anything to do with self-improvement, I just love to learn, right? And so I began enjoying reading. The problem was I had this huge list of books, right? So many titles on a reading list. And I would go through the books, and I would read one, check it off. And then I go to the next one, and then read that one. And see, the thing was, as much as I was learning, a lot of it was not sticking, right? There were concepts in there that were wow, this is amazing. I want to try and remember that for the next time that I'm in whatever circumstance. But I wouldn't remember it, right? It would always be after the fact. And I'd be thinking about it oh yeah, I could have used that principle. That would have made sense there. But the main reason was simply because I never made note of it. Physically, writing it down on paper actually can make you remember things faster and longer. I think there's some stat, don't quote me on this, but something it can increase your memory retention up to 80%. Because there's something very interesting when you write things down. The act of writing something down does something to your brain. It signals to it to slow down and absorb what you're actually learning. What you're writing down is important. So when you're slowing that down, you're writing it out, it means that your brain says, this is important, remember it. And I've found this, I made so many different notes on it. But it wasn't just writing it in the words that were in the book. Instead, I was writing them in my own words. And by doing that, the memory retention went up even further. And this is something that I definitely want to apply because I'm going to start reading a new book now. I have a new one on my mind that I want to read. And I'm okay, I'm going to make sure that I'm writing notes for this. Secondly, if ever that I want to just refer back to certain principles that I've learned from the book, it's so much easier to do instead of having to go back to the book. I'm not saying that I won't read the book again because I probably will. In fact, I should, because it was seriously an amazing book. It's definitely a good read. If you're into this kind of stuff, that's definitely one that I'd recommend. But there's so many more books that I'm hey, I want to read those. But I don't want to just skip ahead and try and read all these books just for the sake of getting through them. Because that's what I used to do. It was I had a list of 100 books and I would go through them and I'd read it. And I'd be okay, great book. Let's go to the next one. Okay, amazing book. Check that off. Just go to the next one. Check it, right? And I wasn't applying anything. And I think it honestly has to do with the fact that I just wasn't remembering it in the moment when I needed it. So I did something about it. I said, I'm going to start making notes on this. And it doesn't feel like it did in school at all. Writing notes seems like something that's why would I want to interrupt the flow of reading in order to write notes? But it doesn't feel like that. Because while I'm reading, what actually ends up happening is, that's an amazing insight. As soon as I see that, I'm I want to remember this. Let me go ahead and write it out in my own words. It's literally I know at the point when something is this is something I definitely want to remember. If I were to say ignore that response in my brain saying yeah, this is important, but it's not that important. Let me just keep reading. My mind would constantly just be thinking about that as I'm reading the next sentence and the next sentence. And that means I'm not actually focused on those sentences and I'm missing out on what's to come because I'm still preoccupied with the previous sentence. Does that ever happen to you where you're you're not really focused on what you're reading? It's because your mind is elsewhere. Well, mine was on the previous sentence because that was important to me. So I said, I'm going to write this down. And by doing that, my memory has increased because of it. And it actually makes it more enjoyable, because the moment that you write it down, you don't necessarily need to think of it anymore in that moment. It's kind of like you wrote it down, it's locked in your memory, you could keep going, you could keep reading, right? But look, the thing is, lots of people I don't even think enjoy reading, and it's simply because they're not reading books that they enjoy, right? I think everybody should read. It's just that, like, we've been taught in school, like, you know, here, these are the books that you got to read. Like back when you're in English class, none of those books were interesting to me. And I used to think, I'm like, not only do I not like reading, but I thought that I wasn't even good at it because I was not focused on it. I was like literally like reading this and I'm like, this is so boring. Every time I'm reading this, it's like, I just want to like close the book. But I don't feel like that at all now. Reading books is actually so enjoyable. And it's like one of the things that I do later in the afternoon. It's a time when I'm like relaxing. I've already done all the hard work for the day. I've already done exercise. And now it's time to just calm down and rest before I go to bed. And by doing that, it's actually a great time to start learning because you're more in a receptive state at that point. You know, in the beginning of the day, you should be using that to be proactive, to go out, do what you got to do the work. But at the end of the day, you want to be in a more calm state where you can relax. So you don't want to stimulate yourself. You want to calm down and you're going to absorb and learn the information so much easier. And so that's how I go about doing it. I definitely recommend doing that. If, say, like right now, you're like, I kind of want to read, you know, there's these books that have been on my reading list and I just haven't done it. See if you could try and fit that in your schedule. I think it's definitely worth it. Reading is so important. I've learned so much from books that you probably won't get from YouTube videos. Like, as much as I want you to say, watch my YouTube videos, a lot of the knowledge that I learn are not from other people's YouTube videos. These ideas come from books. I don't know what it is about it, but there's just certain books, especially like these classics, like you've probably heard of, right? Like How to Win Friends and Influence People, The Way of the Superior Man, right? All these types of books. There's so many amazing insights in there if you're into this topic, if you're into self-improvement, that you can learn from. Now, of course, you could learn from the YouTube videos, but sometimes, you know, it's a little different. It's like you're not getting it right from the source, you're hearing from somebody else, which can be good, right? Because now you're getting someone else's perspective. That's probably why you're still watching this video here, right? Because you enjoy hearing it from someone else's perspective, possibly somebody who's similar to you in some way, right? So there's definitely value in that. What I'm saying though is when somebody recommends a book, like say, such as I did in this video, you might go, that's interesting. I like what this guy's talking about. I kind of resonate with him. Maybe I'd also appreciate the books that he's sharing. And then you go take a look into those. Because now you're getting the root source, right? You're getting the value directly from the source, right? So the main idea behind this video though is just the fact that you should absolutely be reading. But number two, to remember what you read, make sure you make note of it. It'll improve your memory by like 80%. And it's so much more enjoyable because now you can focus on what you're reading. So I hope this was helpful to you, and I'll see you in the next one.